Good evening, everyone, and welcome to PFN's NFL Draft Insiders. I am Matt Canada. I am the CEO of Pro Football Network. I'm filling in for our regular host, Andy Herman, who's feeling a bit under the weather tonight. Andy, if you're watching, we hope you're feeling okay. And I'm joined by the one, the only, the greatest NFL Draft Analyst, NFL Draft Insider, Tony Pauline. Tony, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm doing great after that introduction. I hope everybody's well as we close out 2020, the last, I guess, day and a half of 2020. I'm sure not too many people said that this year will be going by the wayside soon.
It's been quite a year, obviously, personally, throughout the world and throughout the NFL, throughout college football. You know, talking about 2020, and we're going to put out a year in review piece on Friday for PFN. PFN on Friday will turn 2 years old. It's been a crazy 2 years, and Tony, you've been with us most of those 2 years. And, just thinking about the NFL and college football in general, all the discussions about it being canceled and it not making it through it 4 weeks. And here we are heading into week 17 in the NFL, heading towards the end of the college football season and bowl season and heading towards the national championship. Both organizations have done an absolutely terrific job managing this pandemic, getting through the season, and giving everyone kind of that relief, that out from reality and a way to just get away from everything.
And we said this about the NFL since if you were with us over the summer, when I was reporting live from those calls, those NFLPA calls, as far as what was coming as far as COVID testing, roster sizes, and things of that sort. They were always adjusting. They were always very flexible. It was basically, no steadfast rules in the sense that if something popped up, they would deal with it at the time. I think the league has done a sensational job, as has most of college football. The ACC did a good job. The Big 12, the SEC. I think the Big 10 got a little bit lucky. The Pac-12, they started later than everyone else. I think they're feeling the effects of that. But still, got to see those conferences play, and it's not only because the players wanted to play. You had guys on the college scene like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields who were pushing hard to get the college season in. So a lot of people deserve credit.
Absolutely, and talking about now the NFLPA and looking at what happened so well this year and looking at it for next year, we're going to kind of get into that in just a little bit. But before we do, I just kind of want to transition there with the NFL. Right, it's the pandemic world, but it's still business as usual. We're heading into week 17. We're heading close to Black Monday, and there is lots to talk about. There is lots around the NFL draft coming up. Everyone, a lot of people are turning their attention to the draft. I know on the site we've seen a lot of our traffic pick up around our draft articles, around our mock draft simulator, which you can find on our website at profootballnetwork.com. And really one of the bigger questions going into, bowl season and towards the playoffs, right, for college football has been about draft stock. And for you, Tony, looking at your mailbag that was posted a short while ago on the website, you talked about a few players whose draft stock has fallen the most since the beginning of the college football season. And for you, who are those guys?
Two defenders, and it's really going to be a weak defensive draft, 2021. Number one, Marvin Wilson, the defensive tackle from Florida State. A lot of people thought he could be a day 2 pick. Some people thought second round. Really was very uninspired his play this year. Had 17 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Time after time, Wilson was being controlled at the point of attack. I think right now he grades as a 5th-round choice. So Marvin Wilson has taken a big hit on his draft stock. Probably no player has watched his draft stock suffer more than Hamilcar Rashed Jr. of Oregon State. I mean, here's a guy who a year ago, in 2019, 22.5 tackles for loss, 14 sacks coming out of junior college, was graded as an early round 4 pick. A lot of people thought a big year would push him into the second day of the draft. Rashed was talked about as a player who probably would have considered or should have entered the supplemental draft if there was a supplemental draft to get his NFL career started early. There was no supplemental draft. The Pac-12 started late. In 7 games this year, he's got 23 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, no sacks. If you watched Oregon State play at all this year, it looked like Rashed was just meandering around the field, wanted to be someplace else. I saw it. I talked to scouts on the West Coast who said his draft stock was tanking. He probably would have been better off opting out than playing the way he did. So Hamilcar Rashed Jr. of Oregon State, one of the most anticipated edge rushers, if you will, goes from a guy who was an early day 3 pick, potential day 2 pick, to someone who's going to fall into the late rounds of the 2021 NFL draft.
And right now on your big board, you have Rashad, as a projected 5th-round pick, ranked 258th overall. And like you mentioned, that kind of just dropped a season. It's amazing what can happen in a year for these college football players who are that status 1 year, right? They go back to school, and then all of a sudden their stock just tanks. And that's what we've seen with these two players.
And the thing with Rashad is it looked like he didn't even want to be out there. I mean, he just looked like he was disinterested, didn't want to play. As I said, wanted to be someplace else. And you can bet, everything that you own that he's going to be grilled on that at combine interviews, in individual interviews, pro day interviews, however they do it in the lead up to the draft. They're going to ask him, why weren't you motivated? I mean, why did you show no fire in your game? And those answers better be real good, or he could drop later than the 5th round.
And another guy, in that same kind of aspect there, we've seen the draft stock falling just a little bit based on the performances the past few weeks and games is Justin Fields of Ohio State. Many people declared him the number 2 quarterback in the NFL draft right after Trevor Lawrence. And he struggled a bit. And now there's lots of talk on this show, on other shows, on other websites, our website, Zach Wilson being QB2 now in the NFL draft. And we just made an update to our mock draft simulator earlier today. We took out the hard code of Justin Fields going to the Jets. They're wide open. And now we've seen in our simulations that have been running, Zach Wilson jumping over Fields jumping over Wilson. That's going to be a race to watch. But what are you looking at for Justin Fields to really expand upon and prove in the college football playoffs?
Well, I mean, he plays Clemson, and if you remember a year ago, they lost a close game to Clemson in the semifinals. You had that bad penalty by Sean Wade. You had a couple of drop passes. What you want to see from Fields against Clemson is you don't want to see any errant throws. You don't want to see any bad interceptions. You don't want to see him force the ball, which is what he did against Indiana and Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. The thing about the Clemson defense is they're a terrific unit. They play really team football, except for Kendrick, the cornerback, the junior cornerback. There are no real stars. When I say stars, I'm talking about top 45 picks on that Clemson defense as of right now. But they play tremendous unit football. So what Justin Fields has to do is he's got to stay away from the errant throw, from the forced passes, which is what he's basically been prone to doing. I don't even want to say prone. I think prone is a little bit over the top. But what we've seen from him the past 2 games against Indiana and Northwestern, which has given evaluators reason to basically take the pedal off the metal with Justin Fields, where, as you said, everyone thought all along he would be the number 2 quarterback behind Trevor Lawrence. In fact, if you remember, there were people who were wondering if Justin Fields could close the gap to Trevor Lawrence. I nixed that all along. But again, the last 2 games, you've watched him drop, and now you're hearing about people who think Zach Wilson, the quarterback from BYU, could be selected before Justin Fields.
And let's talk about Zach Wilson, right? Let's go through him now. And before we jump to the draft part of the Jets, right? There was a report on WFAN from Craig Carton saying that the Jets already told Adam Gase that he's going to be fired. And Adam Gase denied it in his press conference. And why wouldn't he, right? And so what is the latest you are hearing on Adam Gase? And then let's dive into what you're hearing about their plans at number 2 or what you think they're going to do with the 2nd pick.
I really haven't heard any updates on Adam Gase because I think it's expected that he will no longer be the Jets coach as of Monday. I mean, we know the Jets are a dysfunctional organization. If somehow they keep him around, which I think there is a less than 0.001 chance that they do, it would just be the most foolish move of the century. Granted, it would be the Jets, though. I didn't delve into it, but the fact is this, Craig Carton, sometimes he comes across on the radio, and I listen to him because I'm here in New York as a buffoon. He had all kinds of legal problems. But let's not forget, Craig Carton was one of the first people to report the story about Manish Mehta stalking the children of Joe Douglas, which in large part led to Manish Mehta's dismissal from the New York Daily News. So Craig Carton is getting his information, or at least reliable information, from someone in the know in the Jets organization. As far as Adam Gase denying it, like you said, why wouldn't he? If you go back to 2019, right before the draft, when I reported that there was a big rift between Adam Gase and Mike McCagnon, Gase was adamant that it was not true. In fact, I believe he said it pissed him off that people were reporting this. And sure enough, right after Mike McCagnon was fired, all stories from other people, Rich Cimini, other places were saying, yeah, in fact, there was a big problem between Mike McCagnon and Adam Gase, and it fell at the feet of Adam Gase. So you got to remember, Carton has reported some solid Jet information in the past, and Adam Gase, all he's done when something like this has popped up is just deny it.
And we saw that in Miami. I'm a Dolphins fan, obviously, and I've obviously followed Adam Gase in Miami, and he was the same way, right? And we all said, and I remember talking to you, Tony, about when it happened. I was filling in for Andy on that podcast back then when he was hired by the Jets. I always said it, if he was able to learn from his mistakes, he could be a good NFL coach. But he got the job too quickly, I think, never had a chance to learn from his mistakes because he blamed it on everyone else. And now we see his second NFL head coaching job is gone. He'll probably end up as an offensive coordinator somewhere, but I think his chance of being an NFL coach is gone.
I would agree. And why would he deserve a third chance? I mean, he was a failure in Miami. He's been abysmal here in New York. So I don't know why, unless it was out of sheer necessity or sheer desperation, which is, I think the necessity part is in large part why he got the job with the Jets, because they turned away Matt Rule. They kicked the tires on Mike McCartney, and you had Peyton Manning pushing for Adam Gase. It was a situation where they were running out of warm bodies. So I don't see why anyone would give Gase another opportunity as a head coach in the NFL.
Right. So when they fired Gase, we talked about, Martindale here. And just really quickly, too, Ben Albright, our PFN Insider on PFN Weekly, last night mentioned that he had also heard that Adam Gase was told he'd be fired. And so that kind of goes along with that report there from Craig Carton. But jumping back to, we talked about Martindale. We talked about Joe Douglas. Ben talked about Joe Douglas as well. We'll have an article on that coming on the site tomorrow. But looking at their draft, and they had the number 2 pick, and Ben was talking about how Joe Douglas seems to like Sam Darnold. And they have a lot of options in play here. And if they choose, obviously they have to get the new head coach in there. But if they choose to build around Sam Darnold, that's going to open up a ton of possibilities for the Jets. They could pick tackle, a wide receiver, probably not a 2, but they could then trade down for a team looking to come up for a Wilson or a Fields. Are you hearing anything about what the Jets plan to do at 2, or what is your gut feeling about that? Your thoughts?
Anything at this point in time is speculation. I mean, you say, are they going to build, will they build around Sam Darnold? This would be the second time, or even the third time they built around Sam Darnold, because they did it with Todd Bowles. They tried to do it again with Adam Gase. And remember, you got 1 year left because Sam Darnold's in the 4th year of his contract. So at the end of the 4th year, you're either going to give him the 5th year or you're going to get rid of him. Maybe he likes Sam Darnold, but he's got no connection to Sam Darnold. He didn't draft him. It's not his player. You're going to bring in a new coach who has absolutely no connection or no responsibility for Sam Darnold. People in the league tell me what they think is going to happen. And again, this is speculation at this point, is, the Jets will shop the pick to see if they can get a home run, if they can get a king's ransom for it. But they believe ultimately they expect the Jets to select a quarterback. And I think that's what's going to happen. Again, pure speculation, because there's a lot of, you don't know who's going to be the head coach in 2021. Is he going to be an offensive guy? Is he going to be a defensive guy? Although we keep the name of Wink Martindale keeps cropping up. Who are going to be the assistants, and what do they think of Sam Darnold?
And, Sam has had his chance for a little bit, right? Under Gase, obviously, yes. We saw Ryan Tannehill in Miami struggle and then go to Tennessee, and now look at him. And so now people are pointing to Gase. Well, is Gase the problem with Darnold? And if they get a great offensive coordinator, if they get a great head coach in there, will he turn it around? But there were questions coming about him out of college as well. And there was no sure thing that he was a franchise quarterback coming from USC.
Absolutely. I mean, and a lot of the problems that we saw during his rookie year were just a continuation of what we saw from him at USC. A lot of turnovers, interceptions, bad passes, slow to read and recognize, not always the proper reads. I'll tell you this, though. The second half of his rookie season, he looked terrific. I mean, he looked like he was going to be the real deal. And then you underwent the entire coaching change to Adam Gase, and it's been all downhill since then. There have been a few bright spots, especially the past couple of weeks, but overall, it's not been good. You got to wonder. I know Darnold says he wants to be a Jet for life, but would it benefit him, to stay here? Would a change of scenery be good for him? He's still valued in parts of the league. There are still teams that think he's going to be a real good quarterback, or he's got the potential to be a real good quarterback. It may not just be with the New York Jets.
Right. And Ben reported that as well. There were teams lining up. There would be teams lining up to get him. He's a young quarterback, and coaches think they will be able to mold him into what they want. Let's shift over now to the defensive side of the ball. Let's move on from the Jets and go to the cornerback class. And a question in your mailbag that appeared on the site again a few hours ago was, the perception is that this is a weak cornerback class. You have a guy like Patrick Surtain, the second to the top. You have Shaun Wade. You have a Caleb Fairley. You have J.C. Horn, even that first, second round fringe guy, which you haven't rated. What are your thoughts on the cornerback class? Is it as weak as people perceive it to be? Are there holes in everyone's game? Is it going to be a situation where teams are kind of just skipping over these guys because they have a better value somewhere else?
It depends. I mean, cornerback is a priority position during NFL draft weekend, especially early in draft. We saw that last year, the bottom half of round one, actually the second half of round one, where a lot of surprise cornerbacks were selected in that first frame that we didn't think were going to go there. I'll say this, I'm not a fan of this cornerback class. I'm not a fan of the secondary class as a whole, either the cornerback or the safety position. And there's a lot of risk in all these guys. Patrick Surtain, big, physical, athletic, looks great on one play, but he struggles making plays with his back to the ball time and time again. Shaun Wade, a lot of inconsistency. Caleb Farley, I'm seeing him mocked in some instances in the top 15. Caleb Farley played like a top 15 NFL prospect on occasion for 2 years at Virginia Tech, was just never a consistent force. He's got great size. He's got good speed. He's got solid ball skills. There's a lot of inconsistency. J.C. Horn, again, very streaky. Had some outstanding games, but also had some lapses. So I think really with the cornerback class, you're looking at what we saw with Sam Darnold, a guy that's got great upside, or a class that's got great upside, but also comes with a lot of downside risk. No Jeffrey Okudas in this year's class.
Let me put you on the spot here, Tony, for a second. Let me go off script for just a minute here. Shaun Wade, right? He was a guy last year from Ohio State. Many people thought that if he entered the draft, he'd be a first-round pick. And you still have him rated as a first-round grade. But there has been chatter about him slipping because of the position change, right? And because he wants to prove his value to the NFL. And he struggled there a bit this year. Do you think that's going to affect him at all in this year's draft?
A couple of things. Number one, there were some scouts who graded him coming into the season as a third-round pick. That's for sure. The other thing is you got to remember, he was a nickelback last year at Ohio State because you had Arnett and you had Okudah, who were the starting cornerbacks. So he goes in this year and he's the man on the island. I mean, he's the number one guy, and he has struggled. He's got excellent size. He's got a lot of upside. I think he has enough ball skills and potential down the road that he'll be taken in the first round. Listen, we've seen guys from Ohio State that came off of bad seasons. Eli Apple, Bradley Roby, who ended up as first-round picks, didn't necessarily pan out. But what happens is scouts or coaches are going to see a guy like Shaun Wade. They're going to see his size. They're going to look at the good film, and they're going to say, we're going to coach this guy that played at that level every game.
Let's jump over now to the NFL, right? Dwayne Haskins released by the Washington football team after just a turbulent season with Ron Rivera. And there were mumblings coming out of the draft process. There were mumblings last year with Dwayne Haskins that obviously picked up this year. And now he's not on an NFL team. Do you think there's going to be a chance for him to rebound, to land with another team, to revive his career, or is this going to be a flame out like a Jamarcus Russell, let's say?
I think there'll be another chance for him, but it could still be another flame out. I mean, Haskins is a guy I never would have expected him to be as bad as quickly as he was. And I think a lot of it is just self-inflicted wounds. I mean, just stupid mistakes. He's up and down. You see him last year screaming at his offense, what can I do to be better? And then you see just some of the recent stupid mistakes, which led to his to him getting cut from Washington and no team picking him up. Although I think this late in the season, no one's going to pick him up, especially with all the COVID protocols. There's no real reason to pick him up. And really some bad play at times. I mean, he's shown flashes, but there was never any good, consistent play, and there was some awful play. I think, as I said in the question and answer, I think, he says he wants to be a better person. Let's hope for that. If he concentrates on himself, if he concentrates on his game, and more importantly, if he gets a real good quarterback coach, I think his career can be revived, but it's going to be an uphill battle for him.
It's an unfortunate situation with these younger guys who come into the league who don't have that mentorship, and even, an organization like Washington where there's so much going on. You can't blame the organization for a guy's transgressions. And, he was at the strip club the other day with all the COVID going on and making that irresponsible decision and putting a lot of people in danger's way. And so he parted with his agent, mutually parted ways with his agent earlier today. And so you just have to hope, for his sake, for others' sake around him, that he finds a way to get his head back on his shoulders and really find a way to get back to being a starting, maybe quarterback caliber player, or at least a serviceable backup to have a career in this league.
And I think, like I said, in the question and answer, it gives you pause. And I've stated this time and time again. These college quarterbacks who enter the draft after just 1 year of starting experience, they don't have a lot of longevity. That's why I keep saying with Trey Lance of North Dakota State, who started 1 year and is now entering the draft as a redshirt sophomore after playing one game this season. Granted, that's not his fault. It was because North Dakota State only scheduled one game due to COVID-19. I say with Trey Lance, if you select him, you may benefit by sitting him for a year. I know people don't want to hear that. He's got a great amount of upside, but for a guy that really has played such little football on a small school level, 1 full year of starting, to basically draft him and throw him into the fire. We've seen guys like Dwayne Haskins. We've seen the struggles of Mitch Trubisky, although hopefully he's righted the ship. We've seen time and time again these guys who come into the league are high draft picks at the quarterback position, but only started 1 year in the college level. They don't have a lot of longevity.
So one guy, interesting enough, is going to segue into our next segment is Urban Meyer, right? Yeah. And he's been a big defender of Dwayne Haskins, publicly coming out when Dwayne Haskins was benched earlier this season, said he was disappointed by the benching. He's been a big advocate of Dwayne throughout his short NFL career just far. But really the news on Urban Meyer now is that there is supposedly interest from the NFL. And it seems like it's this every year with Urban Meyer. And he never has made that jump because of various reasons. What is the very latest you are hearing on Urban Meyer and the NFL?
Someone close to the situation told me earlier today that the word inside the league is Trent Baalke, who is the director of player personnel for the Jacksonville Jaguars, is pushing to bring Urban Meyer to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Baalke has a good relationship with Urban Meyer going back to 2005. When Baalke was the West Coast scout for the San Francisco 49ers, he did a ton of homework on Alex Smith. He developed a great relationship with Urban Meyer to get information on Alex Smith. And then lo and behold, the San Francisco 49ers make Alex Smith the first pick of the 2005 draft. So that's where their relationship goes back to. And I'm told that Baalke is pushing Urban Meyer or pushing Jacksonville to go with Urban Meyer. Will Urban Meyer take it? People think that it may be easier for him in the NFL because he won't have to deal with the week-to-week, month-to-month recruiting that he had to deal with on the college level. I don't necessarily agree with that, but they feel with the recruiting off of his shoulders, it may be an easier, not an easier gig, but a less stressful gig for him. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but that's what I'm being told. So right now, the word is that the Jacksonville Jaguars, or at least Trent Baalke, the director of player personnel for the Jaguars, is pushing for Urban Meyer. And you got to think, with the Jaguars holding the first pick of the draft, with a guy like Trevor Lawrence coming in, who will be rated head and shoulders above Alex Smith. That job's got to be a lot more attractive for Urban Meyer.
So that would be interesting, right? Because there is also rumors, and hasn't really gone too far, but Dabo Swinney, coming into Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, and you have that end, and you could follow Trevor to Jacksonville. Now you're saying Baalke's trying to bring an Urban, either coach you bring into Jacksonville. I mean, talk about a power combination, and if you had to look at Swinney and Urban Meyer, Tony, who would you think would have better success? There's been a lot of talk about Swinney not being able to have that kind of success in the NFL.
Yeah, it's at face value, I would think Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's did it at a bunch of different schools. I think he's more prone to the NFL game, but Urban Meyer hasn't been in the coaching game for a while. I would agree. I don't think that Dabo Swinney style translates all that well to the NFL. I think he's a great college coach. I don't know why he'd want to leave Clemson because he's got it made there. It's a Bob Stoops situation where all those years the teams wanted Bob Stoops out of Oklahoma. He just stayed there. I I would lean towards Urban Meyer, but the fact is Urban Meyer has not been on the sidelines for a long, long time.
Let's switch now to the underclassmen who may be entering the NFL draft to kind of segue from the fact that Urban Meyer maybe jumped into the NFL and now other players going into the NFL as well. Davion Nixon from Iowa, the Iowa Hawkeyes, has announced that he's going to enter the 2021 NFL draft. And you reported this a month ago that he was leaning towards declaring. What is your thoughts on him? You have him ranked as your 107th ranked player in your big board, projected in the third round, give him a grade of 3.64 defensive tackle. What are your thoughts on him and that value he can have in the NFL?
Yeah, that has changed, and the new updates, which will come out in about a week, I'll have him in the second round, and he'll be, if he's not at the top of my defensive tackle board, he'll be near the top. It's not a strong defensive tackle class this year. It's not a strong defensive draft at all, except for maybe linebacker and some edge rushers. Nixon is an athletic interior defensive lineman who can line up at the nose. He's a playmaker. He's quick. He's explosive. 22 tackles, 5.5 sacks this year. He's a guy who can occupy the gaps, also penetrate the line of scrimmage, make plays in the backfield. Good change of direction. He's a solid player. He's got to get a little bit bigger. He's got to get a little bit stronger. But I think he's going to go much earlier than people project. I don't think he's a first rounder. I think he's going to go somewhere in the middle of second round because number one, but came out of nowhere this year, really, and really played very well. And number two, it's just a very weak defensive tackle class.
Another defensive tackle, speaking of defensive tackles, is Milton Williams from Louisiana Tech. And he's a guy that you have, again, this may be changing, but 161st right now on your big board, fourth round projected pick rate of 3.53. You just mentioned that, the defensive tackle class is a little weaker on this end. So what can Milton bring to the NFL?
Milton Williams was another guy that we mentioned on this show that I had said about 3 weeks ago. I was told he was going to enter the draft. He did. I have him graded as a fourth rounder. Maybe he goes late third round. There were some people who were telling him he was a first or second rounder in order to push him out, or that's the story I'm told, push him out into the draft, which I think was a mistake, a disservice to the guy. He's an athletic guy, and when I've been told, when he tests, whether it be at the combine or a pro day workout or whenever it takes place, he's going to test through the roof. He's going to run in the low 4.7s at 265 pounds, 270 pounds. He's an explosive guy, played defensive tackle for Louisiana Tech the past 2 years. I had him graded as a sixth-round selection off of his sophomore film. He's obviously improved this year, 44 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. I like him more as a defensive end in a four-man front, but he's an athletic guy who's got a great amount of upside, but he's going to need some time before he reaches that upside.
Speaking of guys who are athletic and have plenty of upside, Javonte Williams, right? The guy who's taken almost a little bit by storm a little bit. So he's declaring for the NFL draft. When you look at this running back, where do you see, again, the running back is that position in the draft where it's not that the premium position, but it's a position that teams rely on. You look at the Vikings, right, who are so dependent on a guy like Dalvin Cook, and then you have people telling you that running backs don't matter. So do running backs matter for you, Tony? And where do you see him going?
Well, of course they do. And I guess it's the type of offense that you're running. You saw the Kansas City Chiefs, who throw the ball all over the place, took a running back in the first round in the 2020 draft. I like Williams right now. I like him in the fourth round, probably the top of day 3. There are some people who think he's going to be a second-round choice. There are some people that think he's going to compete to be the third or fourth back in this year's draft. When you compare him to his teammate Michael Carter, he's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit stronger. But still, you're talking a guy that's 5'9", 210 pounds, probably runs and plays in the mid 4.5s. Solid player, not a great player. I don't know that he's a true feature runner at the next level, which is why I have him as a fourth-round selection. Obviously, had a great year sharing time with Michael Carter. Going to be a different ball of wax if he wants to handle the rock on a full-time basis at the next level, which I think he's going to struggle to do, which is why I think his draft stock is going to be a little bit lower than people are projecting.
Let's jump now to the other side of the ball. Let's talk about Zaven Collins from Tulsa, the linebacker. You have him rated as a first-round projected grade, 4.12. Really a guy you've mentioned a lot in your game day blog this year. mentioned in your risers column that you posted during the season. What are your thoughts on Collins and what he can bring to teams in the NFL?
Just a complete linebacker. You know, these days, teams are taking the linebackers early, the smaller guys, the smaller, swifter guys, the guys that are 6 foot tall, 225 pounds, you know, running the 4.6s, can get from point A to point B real quickly. Well, Zaven Collins is a guy that's 6'3", 250, 255 pounds, and is as fast as many of the 220, 225-pound linebackers that we've seen. He's smart. He's a 3-down linebacker. He's a forceful blitzer. He's really a throwback to the type of linebackers that we saw drafted early in the 80s. Those 3-down guys that can blitz, that can stack against the run, that can play the pass, gets depth on his pass drops. Won that game in overtime. I believe it was against Tulane, where Tulane was going into the end zone in overtime, intercepted the pass, brought it back like 80 yards. Smart guy with excellent instincts, pre-med major. Zaven Collins is going to go very early because he's a 3-down defender that can make plays in space, that can rush the passer. You can leave him on the field in 3rd and 5, put him over the tight end, send him up the field against the quarterback. Basically, he can do it all, and he's got the instincts. He's not just an athletic guy. You look at Micah Parsons from Penn State, who everybody loves. He's super fast, but his instincts are very suspect. Zaven Collins, not as fast as Micah Parsons, but really leap years ahead of Micah Parsons when it comes to the ability to read, anticipate, and the overall instincts.
If you had to give I know you don't necessarily like comps, Tony, but if you had to give a comp to a guy in the NFL right now, who would you compare Collins to?
Right now, I'll let one of the viewers do that. I hate doing comps. You're right.
I know.
You're right.
I know you do.
You should have stopped at the beginning.
I know. I remember you telling me last year when I asked you about doing comps in some of your articles, and you told me that you hate them. All right, well, we won't put you on the spot for that one. Let's talk about jump back to the running back position, Jaret Patterson. Right, this was a guy who burst onto this scene. Really, people really started knowing who he was back in November when he nearly broke the FBS rushing record with 409 yards and 8 touchdowns in one game. I mean, that was just insane. I know Twitter was just blowing up. You had him in your riser column after that, obviously. Talked a lot about him in the game.
Before that, I had him my risers.
Yes.
I had my risers the first week of the MAC season because, the thing about it's, I understand what you're saying. He was trending on Twitter after that game with the 8 touchdowns and all those yards. It's not fair because he was really good in 2019. He was a very good back. And, again, if you follow us on PFN, what I was saying was his plan all along was to opt out of the season, of the spring season, and prepare for the NFL draft. And then he became one of the vocal leaders to push the MAC to reinstate their season. Because if you remember, the MAC initially canceled their season in August. And then it was because of people like Jaret Patterson, when the Big Ten decided to have the season and the Pac-12 came back, they were pushing the MAC to have the season. They did. He decided to opt back in, and he put his money where his mouth is. Had a great season. Now, I think Jaret Patterson is a real good college back who doesn't project all that well to the next level. He's not really fast. He's not really big and strong. He's more of a situational player at the next level. I think he can play at the next level. I just don't think he's going to be an early pick. I think he's going to be a day 3 pick. I think he's a 5th rounder. I think he's probably a guy that's going to go and run in the 4.55s. Real good football player, just not a great athlete. And even when you watch Buffalo, they barely, if ever, throw him the football. So he's a bit one-dimensional, but he's outstanding in that dimension. So, again, good college player. I think he's more of a situational back. In the NFL, you're looking at a last-day pick.
So we've had this conversation before, and I mentioned trending on Twitter, but you said he's been on your radar for a while, and is a very good baller. It always seems like it takes the media a while to catch up to these players' draft stock. And so even the combine, right, especially after the combine, people are getting more information, and all of a sudden they talk about guys, rising up the draft boards. These guys aren't rising up the draft boards. It's just the media catching up to the fact that they've always been at the top of draft boards or, close to that.
Right. Oh, exactly. I think what happens is one person will say something about a player. We saw it with Dylan Radson, the offensive tackle from North Dakota State. One scout said, I like Radson. He's a 1st-round pick. I like him better than Walker Little. I like him as much as Penny Sewell, blah, 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 blah. And then everybody gravitates for it. And all of a sudden, Dylan Radson is the greatest thing, and is basically the flavor of the day, if you will. But then when you get a broader opinion, it's really not that's not run parallel to what most people think. Rodson's a good player; it's just not a first-round prospect.
Let's jump over now to guys who you are set to declare or maybe declaring based on the rumors that you're hearing and everything else. And let's begin with Brady Christensen, the tackle from BYU. What is the latest on what you're hearing?
A little bit late on this. I was told yesterday that he was going to enter the draft. I was holding it for the show. And then lo and behold, Christensen announced this afternoon that he is entering the draft. This is something that we actually reported a couple of weeks ago. I reported with Andy Herman a couple of weeks ago. He's the blindside protector for Zach Wilson, left tackle at BYU. He's a long, tall guy, fundamentally sound, great pass protector, solid blocking and motion out on the second level. He's got to improve his run blocking strength. He's got to improve the use of his hands. Coaches will appreciate that. He's a little bit late and lazy with his hands at times, so he's got to improve that. Christensen has already just declared today. I knew he was going to declare. I think right now you're looking at a third-round prospect. Real solid left tackle prospect for the NFL.
Let's jump over now to the safety position, Trevon Moehrig from TCU. You have him rated right now on your big board as a third-round pick. What are you hearing about him?
Going to enter the draft. I believe TCU's bowl game against Arkansas was canceled. I wouldn't be surprised if he announces publicly within the next day or two that he's entering the draft. Some people have him as a second-rounder. I think he can go second round if he tests well. A guy who hits like a linebacker, shows solid ball skills between the numbers. He's got a real good game. I like him a lot. I just want to see with a lot of these underclassmen, I want to see what their true size speed numbers are before I elevate them as top 60, top 45 selections.
And how about talk about Chris Rump from Duke, the pass rusher? Any rumors on him entering the NFL draft?
Yeah, I had written in the Game Day blog a couple of weeks ago that I heard he was leaning towards entering the draft, and I hear he's heavily leaning towards entering the draft. The question is, where is he going to play at the next level? Is he a defensive end? Is he a stand-up linebacker? The fact is this, he can rush the passer. Some people are talking about him as a third rounder. I have him as a fourth rounder right now. Again, want to see his true size speed numbers and see how he projects the next level or what position he projects. Because remember, he comes out of a three-point stance throughout his Duke career, and now all of a sudden he's asked to stand over tackle and rush the passer. It's not a natural transition. It can be a tough transition for some guys, as we've seen in the past. And I think that's what's going to happen with Rump. He's going to be asked to stand up over tackle and rush the passer. I don't know that it's going to be a difficult transition for him, but it's not just a seamless transition as many people think.
And there are quite a few pass rushers, right? I feel like this draft, it can be a little top heavy with edge rushers. And, even looking at your big board, as the defensive ends, as the linebackers, where would a guy like Rump fall in? Where would the other kind of guys fall into place with these pass rushing prospects this year's draft?
Well, you got to remember, pass rushers, I talked about cornerback being a priority position to draft. So are pass rushers, because if you can rush the passer, you can alter the momentum of games. The thing with the guy like Rump or Rousseau of Miami is he solely a pass rusher, a situational pass rusher that's going to be a liability against the run? Is he a three-down defender? Are we going to be able to put him out on the field on 1st and 10, or is he going to get run over? That will dictate where those guys ultimately are drafted.
Let's move on to the guys from Wisconsin, Jake Ferguson and Jack Sanborn here. What is the latest you're hearing them, both from Wisconsin? What is the latest news that you're hearing about the NFL draft?
I'm told Sanborn very likely, if not definitely, going back to Wisconsin, wants to play with his brother. Jake Ferguson, the tight end, was 50-50, as I had reported a couple of weeks ago. I was told that he said he was telling people in his inner circle if he had a big bowl game, he was going to enter the draft. Was mediocre today. I still think he's 50-50. I don't think any decision's been made there.
Okay, let's talk about now USC players. Back in November, you had mentioned, I believe it was November 14th, Game Day blog about two USC players, and I'm going to probably butcher their names here. Talanoa Hufanga and Marlon Tupulotu. I'm going to give it my best shot there, but they declared for the draft, right? And so you reported this, that they were declaring, and now where do you see their value headed into April?
Well, Hufanga's declared. Tuilipota has not. So let's go with Hufanga. Yeah, Hufanga, who's the safety, who is already declared. He is a big linebacker size safety. who hits like a ton of bricks. He's a Sua Cravens type of safety. Best downhill, best in the box, a guy who will take off the ball carrier's head, a guy who is not bad in coverage, but he doesn't have the great range. Right now, I grade him as a late third-round choice because, again, doesn't have that great versatility. I don't know that he would have really benefited that much from going back to school. Now, Tui Pelota, you said you were going to butcher his name. I'm told he's on the fence. He's the defensive tackle. He's waiting for his grade from the advisory committee. I'm sure he's going to get a grade that says go back to school. It's basically he's deciding whether or not going back to USC for another year is really going to elevate his draft stock. I don't think it's going to. He's a good player, but he's an undersized 3-technique tackle, and there's just not a high demand in the NFL draft for that type of player. I grade him as a day 3 pick. I know there are some scouts out there who think he can go in the 3rd round. I'm told right now it's about 50-50, and the decision will come down to, does he think he can really elevate his draft stock by returning to USC in 2021? If he picked up the phone and called me, I would say, I don't think so. You know, if you're done with college football, get on with your NFL career.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that as well. Let's talk about another safety here, Bubba Boldin from the University of Miami. What's the latest you're hearing about him?
I had been led to believe all along that he was leaning towards entering the draft. I've heard he kind of has pulled back a little bit. There are some people who think he's 50-50, doesn't know which way he's going to go yet. I think what happened was that North Carolina game where Miami just got destroyed really exposed him. We exposed him badly against the pass. It basically showed that he's like Hufanga in the sense that he's sort of a one-dimensional downhill run defending safety, sort of your traditional strong safety or a zone guy. I think Boldin's an instinctive player. He's a hard-hitting player. He's a high-effort player. I just don't know that he's got the great range, and that sort of safety is going to go later in the draft. So I'm hearing right now, as far as Boldin's concerned, where it looked like he was leaning towards entering the draft, more 50-50, may return to Miami in 2021.
What's not 50-50, though, is Illinois quarterback Michael Peters. We believe that he's returning to school. Is that what you're hearing as well?
He already announced that he's returning to school. He's basically going to take advantage of the extra year of eligibility that the NCAA has extended to seniors because of the COVID-19 situation, and he's going to go back and play for Illinois next year. I think it's a great decision. I had high hopes for Peters coming into the season. I thought he was a potential late-round pick. Was flat the first game of the year, really did not do well. He's been up and down. He's had some flashes, but there's been no productive consistency or no consistency on a productive level, I should say, by him. He's a big, tall passer. He's got an NFL arm. It's just a matter of him putting it all together and playing at a high level on a week-in, week-out basis. He didn't do that in 2020. Unlike the USC defensive tackle, I think Michael Peters is a guy that if he goes back and has a big 2021 season, he'll see a significant bump in his draft stock.
Are you kind of surprised, Tony, that there are more prospects who may have not taken advantage of this extra year of eligibility? I know you just mentioned if you're ready to get on with your NFL career, right? But for some guys, you know, like a Peters, like someone else, may be able to boost their draft stock if they're already coming into the season this year as a later round pick. You kind of surprised by that or not really?
Well, I mean, I don't know that all these guys have made their decision yet. At some point in time, these guys are done playing college football. I mean, if you're going to play college football, it means it's another year in class, which some guys may be done with class. They're either graduate or they just don't want to go back to class anymore. I mean, let's be honest. The people like that, I was like that, as you can tell. And I guess no, because, you're a 5th-year senior. You're going to be a 6-year senior. Now, all of a sudden, you're a 22, 23-year-old rookie in the NFL, and that kind of changes things.
Let's jump now to kind of a rapid fire format, Tony. We had a lot of questions coming in, and there people want answers. So I'm going to throw you a few questions up on the screen. Let's do it in rapid fire format, and let's go from there. So let's first go to the Falcons. Any news on the Falcons coaching search?
I've heard nothing. There are a lot of people who think that they should keep Raheem Morris. As I haven't inquired about it. I haven't heard anything about it since the fact that, initially I was told that, they would make a move towards Eric Bieniemy.
How about the 49ers quarterback situation in 2021? You see Garoppolo returning there, or you see them moving on?
I think it's still to be determined. I believe that I think they're going to be locked out of the top quarterbacks. So I don't, unless they make a trade for somebody, I think Garoppolo will be back.
Okay, how about the Chargers? I know you reported Anthony Lynn, small chance of him returning. Any update on that?
I mean, again, like Adam Gase, I think it would be a big surprise if come next Monday, Tuesday, Anthony Lynn is still the head coach of the San Diego Chargers. Although they've played better and they're competitive. I mean, except for a couple of games, they aren't getting blown out. But the overwhelming feeling from people I've spoken to in the league and on the West Coast is it's a very slim chance that Lynn returns.
Let's do a few more here. Dave Gettleman, you reported that the needle is moving toward him being fired at the end of the season. Any update on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think after Sunday's game, it's moving a little bit further towards Gettleman being released. But again, the Giants, unlike the dysfunction we see with the Jets, the Giants are very meticulous. They will make the right decision for the organization. They're not going to do anything off the seat of their pants.
And how about the Panthers GM spot? We'll do one more after this.
I've not heard any names, but it's going to be somebody that Matt Rule likes. It's going to be somebody that Matt Rule thinks, he can get along with. It's a situation where I think, like Joe Judge with the New York Giants, where it's going to be the coach is going to have a lot of input on the general manager rather than obviously the general manager picking the coach in Carolina.
And the last one here, Dak Prescott going back to the Cowboys in 2021.
I don't know what other alternatives they have unless they think DiNucci is their future. Although the redhead played pretty well on Sunday.
Yeah, the redhead did play pretty well on Sunday. Andy Dalton. What a mess they're facing in Dallas this year. It's been incredible. Tony, ended the 2020, heading into 2021. PFN turns 2 on Friday. Draft season is coming up. Mock Draft Simulator has been updated on the Pro Football Network website. Mailbag release today. Big Board is updated every 2 weeks now. We are heading into what is your Super Bowl over the next few months. You told me the other day, the good thing, right? The silver lining in the pandemic is that you've been able to watch film and make phone calls, and that's all you've been able to do. So I'm sure you're geared up and ready to go. Your scouting reports will be dropping in the next few months on the site, and I'm sure you're looking very forward to this process.
The next big bonus I got from Pro Football Network, I'm going to buy myself a nice big chair here, a nice big comfortable chair, because this chair is getting kind of dead from my rear end sitting in it all this time. It's going to be, what's going to be interesting is, and someone asked this, it was a real good question last week about, Division I AA FCS football and the scouting, because it'll be interesting to see if these spring seasons kick off, how, what goes about it, because, usually in the spring you're reviewing tape, you're getting ready for the combine. In March, you got the pro days. In March now, we're going to have a lot of small school prospects playing on the football field. So that's another curveball that's going to be thrown into the scouting process moving towards the 2021 draft.
It's going to be fun. I will have to keep that in mind when I send your check out on the mail in the next few days. Maybe I'll throw a few more $100 in there to get a new chair.
Or just send the chair.
Call it a latest gift.
There you go.
I did see someone in the comments about when we were talking about Michael Peters. They mentioned Brandon Peters. So Michael Peters is the legal name. That's why we put it up on the screen is that way, and not just Brandon Peters. So I just wanted to make that note there for that user in the comments section. All right, Tony.
At least I didn't butcher his last name as I usually do. So give me
yeah, exactly. Any last thoughts, Tony, before we head off the air tonight?
No, I mean some interesting bowl games upcoming days. Obviously, the semifinals on Friday, which are going to be fun to watch, and some good games on Saturday as well. And then we'll see who makes the playoffs in the NFL come Sunday's results.
All right. Any predictions for the college football playoffs? Who's going to come out on top?
I think it's going to be basically what everybody thought: Clemson against Alabama. I mean, I don't think Notre Dame's defense is going to be able to stop the Alabama offense. We saw Javonte Smith win Player of the Year award. I don't think there's any way they're going to stop them. I think Ohio State, will be tough, but I think in the end, Trevor Lawrence will find a way to win.
I agree. On top and head to the NFL and turn around that Jaguars franchise. All right, guys. Thank you all to the thousands who have been tuning in each and every week. We've had a great run here for 2020. We're having big things planned in 2021. We hope you all continue to stay with us. If you missed any part of our show, it will be up on our YouTube channel immediately after we go up off the air. Just search Pro Football Network on YouTube. For Tony Pauline, I am Matt Canada. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. Same time, same channel.
Happy New Year.